Okay, good evening, everyone. Broadcasting live, August 21st, 2015. Today we have a quote. Robin, you want to read our quote?
Sure. These 5 things characterize the good person's gift. What 5? One gives with reverence, one gives thoughtfully, one gives with one's own hand, one gives things that are good, and one gives thinking of the result.
So this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, which doesn't say much more than what we have here. It's actually, the entire sutta is first telling 5 kinds of dana that are asapurisa danani. So we have types of dana that are sapurisa danani, and before that, he talks about dana that is asapurisa dana. Dana means a gift. Sapurisa is something like gentleman or good fellow. Sa is good, purisa is man or person. So there are those kinds of gifts that are those people who are sophisticated, are somehow proper people, and then there are the gifts of those people who are not cultured, sophisticated, who don't act properly. So this is a case as opposed to, I think, yesterday's, which was simply, sometimes I mentioned that the Buddha simply gives different kinds of people, right? The 4 kinds of people. Was that yesterday or whenever it was? And doesn't say which one is better, but here we have a clear indication that one is better than the other. 2 types of dana. The dana of a sapurisa it's clear from the language that if it's of a sapurisa, that means it's better than something of a asapurisa, a person who is uneducated or uncivilized or not a gentleman or not a good fellow, that kind of thing. So here he translated it as good person, which is fine. So this is interesting. People often don't realize how much the Buddha actually taught about giving. At least in the West, I think that's common. It's a common criticism leveled against Western Buddhists, especially by those by those generally who are familiar with Eastern Buddhism, wherein one might argue that too much emphasis is placed on giving, where it's all about giving, and it becomes less giving and more, for Westerners, it often feels like an obsession with rewards, the rewards of a good deed. So the emphasis is on what the giver gets out of it, which, as we see, is actually it's actually a good thing, and that's something very much worth exploring and trying to understand. But in general, the idea of giving is something the Buddha talked much about. Charity is considered to be a spiritual practice. It's considered to be a wholesome thing. It's considered to be beneficial towards one's own practice. And I think more directly, and maybe more often, it's the understanding that it's supportive of the organization of the practice. So it may not be the case, or it certainly isn't. You couldn't say that it's the case that dana is necessary, and generosity is a necessary practice. Obviously, a person who is stingy, who is jealous and miserly, is not going to progress very far on the practice because of the intense greed associated with that. But one need not go out of one's way to give necessarily, um, for one's own practice, but for the continuation of the organization of the practice. You could say the religion, it's essential. Generosity is essential, and in two levels at least, not just in supporting a teacher, for example, but in spreading the Dhamma. Generosity in the teachings. If the teachings themselves wouldn't spread, if there was not the generosity of all of us to give, to share, to promote, to be thoughtful, thinking of the next generation, thinking of those people who can benefit from it. If that didn't enter our mind, there wasn't this sort of generosity, then it wouldn't progress. And of course, if there was not support for people to practice or teach and to organize, if there wasn't material support, and active, what you call, I don't know what the word is, but what do you call support that's not physical? There's material support, and then there's not emotional support exactly, but uh, another kind of physical support, like acting to support, working to support, building monasteries and so on. Like the monastery here, the people from the Cambodian community have selflessly, given up their time, and time that would have to be normally bought, in order to finish the project. People did this for free, who gave up their skilled labor for free to build the. There's a open hall at the back there, and they've built a porch around the entire building and shingled it, and now they're making it look. They're putting up these nice pillars and painting them, giving up their Saturday and Sundays. They're giving up their free time, which is remarkable and awesome. So it's these kind of things that support the religion, but you don't have to think of it as religious. No, it's the organization. So we have an organization, which I think we're going to probably have to talk a little bit about tonight, because we've got an announcement. Maybe I just jump right in. No? Today, let's give an example of how charity and organizations, well, it's not entirely about charity and organizations, but it probably, I mean, it's a part of it, which is why I make the connection in my mind. So first of all, here's the scoop. We're trying to, keeping with the theme of Dana, we're trying to spread the teachings. And so that's really mostly what this move to Western Hamilton is all about. And so we had this plan that in January, our organization would rent a house, and it would ideally have rooms and maybe even an outbuilding to allow me to stay there, while at the same time accommodating both male and female meditators. and it would serve as a sort of base for teachings at or related to the McMaster University. So there's a Buddhism association that's up and coming, and be able to maybe connect that. But moreover, just being a resource for McMaster students and that area where there isn't really a Buddhist monastery. The west end of Hamilton doesn't really have anything that I know of. And so I got to thinking that, well, we got an incredible amount of support for the project. There was a outreach to see about support and to solicit support, which has been ongoing. Maybe Robin can just quickly comment on that. How well is it going?
It's going well. We started less than 2 weeks ago, and we're almost at 2/3 of the goal in less than 2 weeks. So that's really great. That's nice to see. It's great to see that kind of support. Which our goal was 6,000, so we're nearly at 4,000, nearly at 2/3 of the $6,000 goal.
So I proposed. I had this sort of the idea that January might be. Well, I think we all know there are some negative aspects to choosing January. First of all, the delay. It means we have to wait another 4 months to get going. The fact that most of the rentals around the university are probably, the good ones are probably up now. In fact, we've probably missed our chance to get the good ones, and best bet would be to wait till next summer. But that there happened to be at least one property that looked quite interesting, and so I contacted the owner of one property, and got a response back from them, and went to see it today. And I've just put a link to a YouTube video showing the property. It's unlisted, so you're the first people besides the very, very inner circle to have seen this video. And there you are, sneak preview of what may be. And so we are just now trying to answer the question tonight. It's our big announcement. Whether we will go ahead and rent, the organization will rent this house, starting sometime in September. I'm not sure September 1st, but close to September 1st, I would think. Which means we'll be moving there very shortly. Which is probably a big deal considering. No, there's not much, but there's a bunch of stuff in this room. All this computer has to go. But pack it all up, and we'd be moving just in time for the September school year, which means when we have our first meeting of the McMaster Buddhism Association, we'll be able to provide this resource. So this, this particular subject today, it's something that makes me, and I'm sure all of us involved, think of this project and understand how important our support, our individual and organized, accumulated, joint support for our organization, how important it is. Anyway, so that's our That's the announcement. Was there anything else to announce? We're just getting ready. Hopefully tonight. My thought is maybe tonight we can come to a decision, and by next week we'll be signing a rental agreement.
If I can just say something, of course, it's going to be a great resource for the people in the Hamilton area, but I mean, you wouldn't object if people from anywhere came to do a residential course, is that correct?
Absolutely not. I mean, I don't object to that here. Internationally, it doesn't make as much difference if I'm here or if I'm in West Hamilton, because here we have rooms as well. A bigger difference is probably the level of organization and autonomy that we'll have. So it's more, you could say it's more to our benefit to have the place. But, that just leads to the benefit of everyone, because by our benefit, I mean our ability to organize, our ability to grow, to advertise, to be a resource. It's going to be increased to create our own community. It'll be a whole night and day. I mean, here I have no local community. The local community here is the Cambodian people, who are great and wonderful, but not one of them has ever come up to me and expressed interest in practicing meditation. So, not really my community.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Your community is spread out throughout the world, really, but groups together in sessions like this, and this is a resource for us as well. I mean, it's not just for the locals. It's definitely available for people who want to travel and go take a course.
Absolutely. And it should mean to figure out which part of the house. Probably, I'm thinking maybe the upstairs would be a good place for a studio place to put this control center. I don't know. And yeah, there'd be a space where the camera could be set up and everything could be set up, and we could have talks. On the other hand, we could also just use the living room, but there'll be an audience. I mean, I'm pretty sure, my own schedule permitting, that there will be more opportunity to do recordings, more so than just this. Maybe on the weekends, every weekend, we could have a day course every Saturday. I would have to come back here. The one catch to this all, and we're kind of off track, I do want to get back to talk about the Dhamma, because we didn't really actually get to the 5 characteristics, which is our Dhamma for today. But just one final note, I guess, is that the one catch to this all, this change, is that I'm still bound to be in one place for 3 months until the end of October. So technically, it's the rains. And the rains, the 3 months, because it would have been raining and for other reasons as well, staying put for 3 months was considered to be an important tradition. There are exceptions. I think the one I'm going to use or abuse, perhaps, here is the teaching one. It's not really abusing, because, well, the idea is that I've been invited to be involved with the McMaster Buddhism Association, and to do that effectively, it's much more effective if I am local. So if I have to go back to Stony Creek every night, it limits the ability to be involved in evening programs, for example. So I'm allowed to be away for up to 6 nights, but then I have to come back here. So the idea is to spend the weekdays there until the end of October and still come back here on the weekends. So there'll be 2 months of that. It's going to be a little bit complicated, but I think it's worth it, especially with this property, which happens to be quite well priced. They're asking for 1,600 $1,600 a month Canadian, which I think we've agreed, the board has agreed, is reasonable, more than reasonable, I guess, and feasible, more importantly. And so we're going to go for 1 year lease, right?
It's also for sale for $500,000. So by chance, if anyone wants to purchase it,
well,
it's for
it's
sale as
funny
well.
because $1,600 is, I think, fairly cheap, and for a house, and $500,000, I think, is fairly expensive. So it's an interesting situation to have a house that is low rent, low price rent, but high price to buy. The head monk who drove me there, and who I talked with afterwards, I said, "What do you think about buying it?" And he said, "Oh, that's a piece of garbage," he said. He was totally said, for $500,000 you could get, he said, for $200,000 you could get a nice house, but it's not really true. If you know that, if you look at the location, I mean, that's right. It's a prime piece of real estate, really, from a commercial point of view, because, oh yes, it's commercially zoned, and it's right at the end of a strip, of the commercial strip. You know, if you see that street, that's King Street, which, you know, it's King Street. It's a big street. So it's maybe not entirely what we're looking for, but if we ever did build a monastery there, it would be there would be no need to rezone it, I think. I mean, maybe minor rezoning or something, but commercial zoning means we could call it a meditation center business, right? I mean, the point is, you'd have no one complaining. There'd be no problem with advertising, putting a big sign up front, meditation center. Doesn't mean we charge money for it. But anyway, 500,000, I think, is a pipe dream. My teacher, I remember they were building a 5-story meditation hall out in the rice field. It was a 5-story hotel, basically. Not exactly a hotel, but, you know, really somewhat mind-boggling, especially at the time when the current facilities were nowhere on that scale. And so his secretary had this big idea and was pushing these plans, and he was showing pictures and everything. And Ajahn said, "This is our dream," or he said, "It's a dream," in Thai. He said, "Yeah, this is a dream." And he kind of laughed at it. But in the end, the impressive thing is they managed to build it and spend lots and lots of money, but out in the middle of a rice field. Basically, they've turned a rice field into a incredible meditation center. I mean, I think that's fairly common in Thailand. It's not, it's special, but it happens more often than not, and that, or more often than one would think, and it points to the incredible um, ability of Asian Eastern Buddhist cultures, to, especially Thai culture, to organize charity and people's selflessness in giving. And I don't know that it's actually selflessness, and this is where we get into the actual qualities here. The most interesting one is the 5th quality, and it's in the relation to selflessness. But first, okay, so we have giving with reverence. When you are charitable, giving with doing it respectfully is considered to be important. If you give condescending or looking down upon the person who you're giving to, it's not really proper giving. If you give to a beggar but you pity them, if you give something out of pity, it's not as great as if you respect the person as a person, no matter who they are, and you do it respectfully. Giving thoughtfully means with consideration. Oh, there's a good commentary to all of this. I can get some good. Right. The second one is chitti katva, whatever that means. It means having made in the mind. No? Chittikarang. I've never heard this chittikara. It's interesting. Chittikarang upadapetva. Upattapetva. Yeah, it means takini suchitakarang. Right, giving, having brought to mind, having brought one's mind to consider, having given thought to what is appropriate to give and who it is appropriate to give to, who deserves to be given to. So giving where it's deserved, these are the two important qualities that one is considered to be thoughtful. If one, it's not thoughtful as we think of it in the West, it means having given it some thought. So considered, maybe, considering carefully, considering what is appropriate to give. Yeah, that's thoughtful, right? Well, how thoughtful of you when you give a gift that is meaningful and purposeful and useful. And more important, or equally important, giving to someone who deserves it. So not just giving to people because you like them, because you're partial towards a person, giving to your children, giving to your spouse, giving to your, I suppose giving to your parents would be another category, but giving to your children clearly is not exactly charity. There is charity involved, very much so, but it's not the same sort of charity as giving because the person deserves it, except in the sense that your children deserve your support because you are responsible for bringing them into the world. So it's your duty to support them. But not the same as you would give to someone who you respect, to your parents, to your teachers, etc. To your people who you support, like political figures. I think there's something to be said for the wholesomeness of supporting a political campaign, potentially. I mean, if the political campaign is someone who is working, like you could say supporting a king would be the equivalent in the Buddhist time. So today, supporting a political party, if the political party is worthy of supporting, I would argue that political parties can be forces of good, potentially. I think there's an argument to be made there. So supporting a political party could be potentially supporting someone who is a good person, who is working for the benefit of other people, so worthy of respect, worthy of gifts. Which is interesting because you wouldn't think a political contribution to be a wholesome thing. It's not. I've never given political contributions myself, but I think it certainly could be a wholesome thing. It could also be a very unwholesome thing if you're supporting the wrong party. Or what usually means if you're supporting any party, because most of them are usually crooked from what I hear. Number 3, gives with one's own hand. Sahata deity. What's the opposite? The opposite of sahata, with one's own hand. Oh yeah, asahata. It's just not in the commentary. So giving with one's own hand. There's a story in this regard about a man who didn't do this. A very rich man, maybe a prince or a king, I can't remember, in the Payasi Sutta, I think, of the Digha Nikaya. And so it's interesting, Payasi was a skeptic. Let's look this up. Yeah, Digha Nikaya number, whatever it is, 23. So who was... Payasi Raja. Yeah, Payasi was a king. No, Rajanyo. Was he a king? A chieftain, a Rajanya. Not a Raja, but a Rajanya. One, something like of the king. It's a lesser king. So a chieftain of or Setabya, lived on a royal domain gifted by Pasenadi. That's what the DPPN says. Anyway, at the end of this sutta, so the Payasi Sutta is an awesome sutta to read because it's called, the translation in English, or the title in English, I think, by Maurice Walsh, is Debate with a Skeptic. Let's see if I have the English translation here. He calls it, in parentheses, he says Debate with a Skeptic. And it goes through all sorts of reasons. It's not actually about the Buddha. It's about Kumara Kassapa, who has a debate with Payasi. I think at the end, someone goes to the Buddha and tells the Buddha about it. Yeah, at the end there's stuff about. He goes to, in the end, Payasi, it looks like, goes to the Buddha anyway. The point being, Payasi later passes away, but later on Payasi becomes a devoter, a devotee of the Buddha, and a donor to the Buddha, supporter of the Buddha. And it says, right, not just the Buddha, but Prince Payasi established a charity for ascetics and Brahmins, wayfarers, beggars, and the needy. And he gave it all out, but but he gave, right, but he gave stuff that wasn't worth giving. So he got his servant Uttara to give the food out, to give out food and charity. But what he gave out was broken rice and sour gruel. And Uttara complains to him and says that this isn't something that Payasi himself would touch with his foot, let alone eat. And he giving rough clothes with ball fringes, I guess these little pilling, I guess we call it. So it means the coarse weave that he says you wouldn't care to set your foot on as a mat, much less wear them. And he said, "You are kind and gentle, Lord. How can we reconcile this with you giving such coarse offerings?" And so Payasi said very well and gave, and said, "Arrange as you think fit. Arrange as I would eat and as I would wear." So as a result of his push, the push by Uttara, he gave you whole proper, worthy gifts. But he still didn't do it with himself, and so the sutta says, whoever put the suttas together relates to us that Prince Payasi, because he had established his charity grudgingly, not with his own hands, means Uttara was the one who actually ended up distributing, giving out these gifts, not just to Buddhists. He wasn't just giving to Buddhists, he was giving to anyone who needed, giving out to all kinds of Brahmins and wayfarers, beggars, and the needy. But he did it grudgingly and not with his own hands. His asahata is our important quality here. As a result, he was reborn as an angel in the realm of the four kings, which is, if you know the four kings, it's in Chinese mythology, it's the four directions. It's where where the Chinese folk mythology got it. They got it from Buddhism, the four great kings of the four directions. It's the lowest of the angel realms. Uttara, his servant, because he had given charity ungrudgingly with his own hands and with proper concern, not as something to be tossed aside, was reborn after death at the breaking up of the body in the company of the 33 gods as a higher angel. And one of the monks found this out. One of the monks who had magical powers was resting in heaven, so he went into the jhanas and went for a rest up in heaven, and saw this, and he thought it was remarkable. And so Venerable is Gavampati is the monk. And when he returned to earth, he said, you should give ungrudgingly with your own hands. None of this is about the Buddha. It's interesting because this is one place where people might be suspicious that this is a later edition. Because it doesn't ever, I think, I was wrong, it doesn't ever bring up the Buddha. There's nothing in here, actually. But anyway, point being that this is in line with the teachings given here in the Anguttara Nikaya, that the best kind of gift is one that one gives not only with one's own hand, but respectfully, with due consideration. Giving with one's own hand. Number 4 is giving things that are good. This is important. If you give things that are useless to you, like if you give something away because it's of no use to you anymore, not especially considered generosity. I mean, meaning you have something already, you don't go out of your way to procure it, but really it's useless to you, right? You have, suppose you have a telephone, and then you get a new telephone, and you give your old telephone away, your old mobile phone away to someone else as a gift. Not really a true gift, or not as powerful a gift. Not really to be not something you should consider as a great gift of great fruit. If, on the other hand, someone you know needs something and you buy it specifically for them, you could still say, well, this isn't something I need, but you have sacrificed the money, the effort to procure the item is still fully qualifies as something that is good. And of course, obviously, if you give away something that is rubbish, that is garbage, that is broken, still beneficial, still considered a gift, but not exactly a sapurisa, what we call sapurisa dana, a gift of a cultured individual, a good fellow, a good person, I mean, literally. Number 5 is the interesting one that I think often surprises us as Buddhists, where we think Buddhism is about selflessness and therefore you should give selflessly, give without expecting any result. That's not exactly the case. It seems quite clear that one should be, as is said here and explicitly stated, one should be thinking of the result. The commentary makes it quite clear. Let's see if we've lost the commentary now. Right. Agamana means what will come, seeing what will come. I think that's literally what it means. Agamana, the result. Dittika means one who believes in the result, one who sees the result. With a belief, but you could literally translate it in one way, with a belief in the efficacy of, or the utility of the gift. And the utility of the gift actually is more in reference to one's own benefit. I think there's an argument to be made here, because it doesn't mention the utility of the gift for the other person. And I think you could take that into account. When you give something, if it's of no use to the person, if you give a luxury car or a jet to a Buddhist monk, for example, if you give a bicycle to a fish, not useful. But the real utility here is actually referring to one's own utility. And the commentary makes this clear. One thinks anagata bhavassa pachayo bhavisati. This will be for the this will be a support for some future state. Kamancha vipakancha sadahitva dehiti. One gives believing in karma and its result, its fruit. And so on a worldly level, this is important, and by extension on a dharmic level. Good karma is important for the practice. I mean, a person who has good karma theoretically should be able to practice easier than a person who has bad karma. Karma can get in your way. It's considered to be a mara of sorts. It blocks you. It can block you in your practice if you're too busy scrambling to feed yourself and clothe yourself, if you don't have good karma. So a person who has done good things in the past, it's a support. It's a support in terms of being physically born in a place that, in a state that is with plenty, but moreover with people who respect you, who think of you as a good person, who support you, who are kind to you, who are helpful to you, respect and so on. And they do this because of the goodness of what you have cultivated. A person who is generous is much more likely to receive support and help and friendship and guidance and all these things. People are much more likely to take them seriously and wish to help them. So, yeah, there is this great benefit to giving, for example, and this is important. A person should be thinking of this when they give. Giving and saying, whatever I'm giving without any thought to cause and effect isn't a Buddhist thing to do, because it ignores the nature of reality. It ignores the whole purpose of being of goodness. Goodness is for a purpose. We cultivate, and Buddhism builds this artificial, you could say artificial structure of goodness in order to um, attain something, in order to achieve something, and that is enlightenment. So there is, all of our practice is about cultivating this artificial state of goodness that is going to allow us, like building a rocket ship to the moon. You have to build the structure so you can take off. Naturally, it's very hard to get to the moon, but once you build the structure, the laws of nature do allow for it. It just takes a lot of work. And generosity, kindness, charity, this is an important part of the structure. Not the most important, but it's a useful. It provides power, it provides energy, it provides encouragement. So seeing this is important. And the Buddha gave an interesting commentary once on the various types of results one can expect. If, for example, one gives thinking people in the past have given, wise people give, that kind of thing, then one is born in a certain realm. And each realm of the heavens is actually associated with a different type of giving. Again, my exact knowledge of the suttas, it's in the Majjhima Nikaya somewhere. Can't off the top of my head remember which sutta, but I think it's in several places, or this kind of talk is given in several places. And finally, I do know this sutta, but I can never remember which one it is. Finally, the best way to give is thinking this will be a support for my mind. If you want to know the best and highest reason for giving, just a second, I'm going to do a search here and get you the sutta number. I'm sure there are people out there wiser than me who can, not more knowledgeable than me, who can give this. No. It's a waste of my time to make you sit there. I haven't taken any questions today, you'll notice. Are there any questions waiting?
I have a question on the third part of the 5 aspects there. Giving with your own hand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, today, we have a lot of things that would distance us, electronic payments and subscription payments and things where you can be kind of far removed. You might set up a regular donation, but then it comes out automatically out of your paycheck, for example. And how would that fit in with giving with your own hand?
It's a good point. I think you could make an argument for the difference between the simple act of, say, making, in our case, a lot of people are making PayPal donations. You could make an argument, I'm not saying it's completely correct, but you actually do it yourself. You say, this money is going to this organization to benefit the organization, and you're doing it yourself, as opposed to saying, distribute my funds as you see fit, and not actually ever making the decision. See, because what we're talking about in the Payasi Sutta is he never actually said, give to this Brahmin, give to that Brahmin, give to this beggar, give to that beggar. He just said, give, but you take care of the giving, and it's removed. It's a step removed, so you never actually have that moment of joy and confidence of giving. So I think you could argue that. But I think you could also argue that it's far better to be the one who actually uses money or funds to actually give something to someone that's a benefit, because obviously putting money in a bank account isn't actually directly benefiting anyone. I mean, especially in our case, because it's an organization. It's the whole thing about this whole issue about money, and in Buddhist societies, giving money has become the standard way of giving. And when you give money to a monk, which is what often ends up happening, you're not really doing the monk a great favor, because now you're forcing the monk to take that money and go and buy things, which is actually breaking a second rule. They've broken a rule by accepting the money, and then they break a rule by going and buying something with it. So contrast that with someone who takes money themselves, asks the monk what they need, goes and buys it, and delivers it. It's on a whole other level. Like, for instance, an Amazon wish list is an interesting example. You're not actually delivering it, but you're making the decision and the purchase, and you're overseeing the giving. I mean, doesn't mean doesn't mean that the postal worker who delivers something, I mean, I have an Amazon list, is why I mentioned this, and people always, I just today got this mic that I'm using. This mic came today, some kind soul, and I don't even think I know who it was. I don't, because here, some kind soul ordered this, and some kind soul ordered something. Oh, I do know who it is. No, I think I know who it is. I've got a name anyway. Kind soul ordered this mic and had it sent. Doesn't mean that the post officer or actually the man who ended up putting it in my hands today, the man who works here at the monastery, he was the one who put it in my hand. Doesn't mean he gets the best benefit. He wasn't actually giving it. The giving, I think, you would have to argue, occurred when the purchase was made by the person on the Amazon market. Nobody else was at all interested in the giving. And ultimately, it comes down to one's mind state. Not so much else is important. Much of what the Buddha talks about, sapurisa, is much more general and conventional. And none of it should be taken as ultimate reality or ultimate canonical truth. It's laying down a sense of propriety. Like it's, this is why I use the word gentleman, because it's gentlemanly like behavior and by gentlemanly it means sophisticated, cultured. It's cultured behavior to give with one's own hand. A true cultured, high individual, high class individual, if you want to say, is someone who gives with their own hands. Most people who think of themselves as high class would never give with their own hands. They would always have someone else do it for them, delegate. But a true high class individual is someone who does it themselves. So it's not so much about the level of interaction, as it is about actually making the giving, the decision to give, and the act of supporting oneself. But there certainly is something to be said for directly giving something like food or clothing or shelter or medicines to people who need it. Giving directly is, I think, still to be preferred to even supporting an organization, which, somewhat shooting, our organization is right now trying to make that work. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to belittle a gift of money. But
Well, that makes sense. You're directing it. You're directing it yourself to,
yeah,
the wholesome endeavor. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
but I think you would have to argue that direct physical action of giving something is still going to have a more profound effect than, and because you feel it when you're giving. If you give food to a beggar, or you put food in a monk's bowl. I mean, there's just so much more joy there. It's just that we can't all do that. You can't build a monastery. Building a monastery by hand. Build a monastery or build a meditation center. If you build it by hand, like they're doing here, people who come here on the weekends, and not the people who give the money for the building materials, but the people who give their time and effort and physically build something. I mean, you've got to respect that, I think. So, I mean, obviously that we all agree that would be preferable. Obviously, we can't do that. We're not going to build a monastery near McMaster University. We're not going to build a meditation center. It has to be bought, so it's removed already by its very nature. But absolutely, I think we would all get more merit and good karma if we put our hearts into building a monastery. On the other hand, as with any gift, and here's an interesting thing, no matter how good we can talk about giving is, the question is how much focus we should put on giving. So yes, we could build a monastery. Do we want to spend the next year, even if we had all the time and resources and money, do we want to put all our energy into building? Or do we want to say, well, it's enough for us to do the money thing and the renting thing, or the buying thing, or whatever, and focus our energies, focus our true heart and true effort on meditation practice. I think there's an argument to be made there that, yes, definitely be much better if everyone were to fly over here and make sure the meditators got food and so on. But it would be absurd, and it would be a complete waste of your time and effort. You would be much better served to make some contribution and then spend the rest of your time doing meditation, right? I think there's a very strong argument for that. But certainly, giving, not thinking about the result, you have it here, words of the Buddha, not the highest form of giving. Altruism, in that sense, also not the highest form of giving. Giving should be, in a sense, selfish. You give to benefit yourself, because truly benefiting yourself means making yourself a better person. And there's nothing selfish there's nothing selfish about that. It's self-centered, but it's centered on bettering, you're making yourself a better person, which is noble. It's the most noble thing. Much more noble than thinking, may this person have a good meal. If your heart of heart intentions is just to provide someone with food, that's good. I mean, it would just be like you having the intention to provide yourself with food. But it's not a high noble intention. A much more noble intention is to think, this person needs this, but my gift is for the purpose of doing the right thing, making myself a better person, supporting my freedom, being an act of renunciation to make me more free. It's a much more ennobling thing, which is, I think, weird for Westerns to think about. But in Asia, that's really all the rage. Everyone is so keen on results, perhaps too keen. And if you become obsessed with results and greedy about results, I think, do you get results? I think yes, you do. I think even if you're giving and kind and generous, thinking, may I benefit in the future because of this? Yes, I think you do benefit from it. Because it's hard to say that that's really greedy. You're doing a good deed. You're helping someone else. You're sacrificing. But it's defiled, so it leads to a benefit, but it probably leads to a worldly benefit. Many Buddhists seem very much fixated on that. Anyway, talk about dana. It's an interesting topic, but it's not really the highest topic. So we should spend some time now, even though we've spent an hour already, on questions, talking about Dhamma.
Why is it possible to get freedom meditating in the body if it doesn't belong to us?
Because you're not getting freedom. There's no us to get free. It's just interesting. I mean, it's hard to talk about, really. The problem with non-self is we are accustomed to speaking in terms of billiard balls, like atoms, things that are impersonal. And I think you'd have to argue that reality is very personal. And that sounds like, it's hard. You can't really say that because it's talking about the self again, but it's personal in that it's first person in the sense of it's experienced, right? It's not actually experienced, but it's experience. You see what I mean? It's not like a billiard ball. It's not like atoms. It's not like the physical world that we've been taught so much as being the basis of reality. That is not, it's not even really a true basis of reality, because underlying the atoms are subatomic particles. Underlying subatomic particles, we don't even know what it is. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they know. It's not, I think, well understood. They don't know what is gravity. They don't know what is, it's not well understood, even matter. But point being, true reality isn't even like that. True reality is experience-based, which is, for lack of a better word, personal. It has some quality that is different from what we think in our minds of impersonal, and it's still, the language doesn't even allow, because none of it's personal. There's no person. Person is just a concept, but somehow it is personal. It's individual. I don't have your thoughts. You don't have my thoughts. That's an important distinction. There is something there. So freedom occurs, but there is no person who is freed. Non-self is the reality, and yet it's very personal. So I think the point, that sounds like weird and perhaps contradictory, but the point, it's only a problem when we get hung up on the idea of non-self. Non-self isn't a problem. It isn't hard to understand. Really look at reality, you'll see it's non-self. It's not controllable. It only shakes you when you then think, but what about myself if there is no self? The Buddha never said there is no self. I've said this many times, and I've had a monk tell me how wrong I was for saying that, but find me a quote, and there is no quote where the Buddha said there is no self. Doesn't mean, and I've said this many times, doesn't mean that the Buddha believed in a self. He certainly didn't believe in a self. He just never said there is no self. Why? It's the wrong framing. And they've given this argument before. Reality doesn't admit of a framework within a self, within which a self could exist. So to ask whether there is a self is already the wrong question. It's like asking, is there a cat in the box? Only makes sense when there is a box. What if you don't have a box? If I don't have a box, and you ask me, is there a cat in that box? I'd say, what box? How can I even answer? I can't answer yes or no. So if you say, is there a self? It requires a framework within which a self could exist. Now, experience isn't that framework. And since reality is based on experience, QV, there is no self. No, QV isn't the right word. What's the word? Ipso facto? I don't know what you say. Yeah, QV, isn't it? Therefore, no self. Not QV, I don't think. Anyway, there is no... Not that there is no self. You see, again, I just did it. Therefore, the question doesn't hold. The point is there a self is not a proper question. I mean, it's dealing in, it's mixing reality, ultimate reality, with conventional reality. It's like you can ask, you talk about a room, and you say, is there anyone home? Right? If you open the door, is there anyone home? That question doesn't make any sense in terms of ultimate reality. So when you ask, is there a self? Well, a self isn't either a convention, or well, no, it is. I mean, you could say, is there a self? You could say, yes, there's myself and there's yourself. But when you ask the question, you're not asking in a conventional sense. You're asking about ultimate reality. No one asks saying, hey, is there a self in this house? You don't ask that, How many selves are there at the school or in the office building? In New York, how many selves are there? Selves are there? You don't ask that. If you ask that, it's all what you would mean is how many people are there. So it's conventional language. But when you ask, is there a self, you're asking about ultimate reality. The problem is self being like person is a convention. Isn't the right language. So there is no self. Not that it's even incorrect, it's just problematic as a statement. It's not accurate. It's not an accurate question or statement. Moreover, and more important for you here, yeah, ipso facto, right? More important for you here is that it creates confusion. When you say there is no self, people immediately say, and these are the Buddha's words. He says they would be more confused, saying, "What happened to myself then? If there is no self, what will become of myself? Where did myself go? What about myself?" It makes it more confusing. So that's the point, is you're confused. Stop being confused. Forget about that. Forget about this whole thing about there is no self, there is a self. Non-self is best understood from a practical point of view. You see things which we could, if we want to take that out, we could say things which were in the past taken to be, but it's not a problem. We can say you. Either way, things which were in the past taken to be self, i.e. controllable, belonging to an individual, etc., turn out to be no such thing, turn out to be uncontrollable, turn out to be dependent on causes and conditions that are from multiple sources, and furthermore have no entity in and of themselves, so aren't an entity. That's another meaning of non-self, having no core. They have no core in and of themselves. It means they arise, and they rise from nothing, they cease into nothing. Seeing that to be the truth. So you'll see it in meditation practice. That's how you should understand non-self. Then you won't have such questions about, if the body doesn't belong to us, How is it possible to get freedom? I mean, it's an odd question, and I think you've got several problems in this question. First of all, non-self has nothing to do with the body. The body is not real. It doesn't exist. So on an ultimate level, saying the body doesn't belong to us is conventional language. And it doesn't have anything to do with the process of attaining freedom, which does have to do with ultimate reality. The process of attaining freedom, I guess you could also argue that that's still a concept, but it's a name for a specific series or sequence of real events that culminate in states of mind which are free from, meaning have no defilement in them, and furthermore have no suffering. A state of mind or a experience of the mind that is free from suffering and free from defilement. That's what freedom means. So you really are, it's very you've got big problems with that, with your argument here, with your question here, because it assumes things that are not exactly correct. You don't get freedom. And getting freedom isn't meditating, it doesn't have anything to do with dependency on the body. It's in actual fact meditating on physical manifestations of the body. That means bodily experience as non-self is very much what sets the mind free from attachment to the body, free from attachment to the body as being self, or not the body, but bodily experiences. When your stomach rises, take the age-old meditation object, the belly. When your belly rises, there is by default the feeling that I am breathing. When you watch it, you feel yourself controlling, conditioning, and as a result, suffering. Once you give that up, you become free from the suffering that is caused. I mean, that's a very simple, even worldly, mundane example. Anyway.
How long would a course be? The meditation course.
Yeah, courses. I don't talk enough. I was thinking today I don't talk enough about courses. I talk all about how you should just be mindful now and worry only about the present. But that belies the fact that intensive meditation is great. So come and do a meditation course here or somewhere else. Certainly you can't beat that. So meditation is momentary. It doesn't mean that one moment a day is sufficient. Certainly moments from the time you wake up until the time you sleep are far preferable. So dedicating your entire day to meditation is awesome. Problem is, in daily life that becomes quite difficult. So coming to a meditation center and dedicating yourself to the meditation practice is an awesome thing to do. Does anyone want to do it? Okay, the question is, how long does it take? How long should I do it for? The Buddha said as a minimum 7 days to become an anagami. Now, you don't see that happening much. But taking that as an example, or even the maximum 7 years that the Buddha gave. Now, you could argue that that all has to do with being with the Buddha. And certainly that's a fair argument. But given everything we know about Mahasi Sayadaw makes an awesome argument somewhere. Again, I could probably find the quote, but he makes this awesome argument about how people say the Dhamma is something that takes years, even lifetimes. It's not something you should consider to be possible here and now. And they criticize, many people would criticize the courses that we do. There are traditions even today that criticize Mahasi Sayadaw courses, Goenka courses, as being intensive, but limited, in their, just by their very length. And the argument is that the Dhamma takes years and it has to be accumulated naturally. because those traditions have that sort of practice where they do things over the course of months or years. And they assume that becoming a Sotapanna is something that could potentially take you all your life. And Mahasi Sayadaw says that's a very dangerous view. And he says that sort of view is one that belittles the Buddha's teaching as being less incredible than it actually is. He said the Buddha's teaching is incredible, and if someone puts it into practice, and he gave this as anecdotal from his own experience and from what he had seen and from what he understood, that 1 month was a good basis, that within 1 month in modern times, the average person can get a very good basis in practice. And that's very vague in general, because we don't want to put people's hopes up, and we don't want to be bragging or be insinuating anything about people's states of enlightenment. But you can imply, you can take from that what you will. We have to be generally vague. I can't make a more bold statement than that because it's not proper for various reasons. But people who think that it has to take years or lifetimes to become enlightened are, even basic, on a basic level, to become a Sotapanna, seem to be criticizing or belittling the Buddha's teaching. It's really still an incredible teaching, and the teaching is still here. It's not like it's gone anywhere. So with that sort of idea, we've always had the idea of having a 20-some day course. It used to be 26, which is more in line with what Mahasi Sayadaw was saying, but it's usually cut down to 18 or 21, say, 21 days. And then there's a 10-day review of that. And from what I've seen, that those two courses together are, really, really sufficient. They're an awesome foundation, a very strong foundation. I mean, everyone is different, and not everyone is going to get the same thing out of them, but far and for the vast majority of people, that's going to be a good start. So if you can do that, that's awesome. Do a 21-day course and then do another 10-day course. Even a 21-day course for many people is provides a great, it provides profound realizations of some sort, and different people, different level of result. But that being said, there's no shame in doing a 3-day course, a 7-day course, and we're open to any number of days, of course. So that should answer that question.
Can you tell us what your monastic name means?
I could, but do we really want to waste all this time on these questions? Well, that last one was an important one, but Yutta Dhammo means, let's make it brief, Yutta Dhammo means one who has the Dhamma well organized, which I obviously don't. It could also mean, but it's not as likely, it could also mean one who is made up of Dhamma, which is actually less ostentatious. It's what I prefer, but the grammar isn't as clear for that one. Could potentially mean that, but it's not as likely a construct. Yutta Dhammo could mean one who is made. It would be more like Dhamma Yutta. If it was Dhamma Yutta, it would mean one who is connected with the Dhamma or one who is composed of Dhamma. But Yutta Dhamma, it's more like a compliment, I think. And most Thai Buddhist names are complementary. When I've ordained people, I've always chosen existing monastic names, usually ones that were similar to the person's, non-Pali name. And the last person I ordained, I named him Mogaraja. Does anyone remember Mogaraja? And I got in big trouble because Moga is a bad word. And so people who knew this word thought it was not a very complimentary word, and they didn't want to. They thought it would be embarrassing to bow down to someone, or they, not exactly, but they told me that we bow down to this person, so they should have a good name, and it became a real issue for people, and I had to write an article about why I was insisting on the name Mogaraja. It's an interesting name. Mogaraja is a very interesting name, and the person Mogaraja was an awesome disciple of the Buddha. He was one of the 80 great disciples of the Buddha, so it's a name worth passing on, even though Moga means useless, or so it literally means the useless king. But that's not at all what it means. It means the king who the person who understood the uselessness of kingship, because Mogaraja was someone who did, I can't remember what exactly it was, but the way he got his name was due to the realization of how useless kingship is, I think.
Can you briefly explain merit and the transfer of merit?
Briefly, merit is goodness. The word merit is a problematic translation. Goodness is a better one, but I prefer goodness. So goodness is doing good things, having a good mind state, and acting upon it, or not even acting upon it. Transferring goodness is dedicating it to others. When you dedicate it to others, it makes them feel good. It's a way of sending love to them, and so they can receive the good vibes you send. They can also, if they hear about your dedication, they can express their appreciation, and as a result, they benefit from their own goodness, the goodness of appreciating your good deed and feeling good about the fact that you've dedicated goodness to them. Next.
Any views on the Buddhist Pure Lands?
No, I don't think it plays any part in our tradition. That's all I'd say.
Is observing the monastic precepts inappropriate or detrimental for a lay Buddhist?
No, go for it. Absolutely. If you can, do it. No need to wait to become a monk. I had the same question when I was starting, and I kept the 8 precepts. Eventually, I gave them up because that was the advice I was given. So power to the people who gave me that advice, but personally, I think it was great what I did. I mean, it was difficult as a layperson, but I don't regret it, and I think it was. I ended up later keeping the 8 precepts again. Like, you're not talking about actually. You're not talking. So wait, okay, wait. You're not talking about monastic precepts, and I do have to specify here. You're talking about the 8 precepts, which are perfectly. There's canonical references to people who kept the 8 precepts. Dhammika, I think, was one. There were several lay disciples who kept 8 precepts, wore white all the time. I mean, that wasn't such a big deal in India at the time. Wouldn't have been completely white, considering how dirty it gets, but undyed cloth, undyed cotton they would wear. It's a thing, and that's only 8 precepts. Now, I would caution against trying to keep all of the monastic precepts, because some of them are specifically designed with monastic life, keeping in mind monastic life. So one of them, if you're keeping monastic precepts, you can't take food for yourself, you can't store food for yourself, you can't touch money. These sorts of things, problematic. Now, okay, you could maybe say, I can go without money. Difficult, but harder to go without taking food for yourself, storing food for yourself. And there's more with that. I mean, there's lots of etiquette things that have specifically to do with being a monastic that, anecdote, when I went to Thailand the second time, it was with the intention of becoming a monk temporarily, because I knew that I wouldn't be given, my parents weren't going to go for me ordaining full time, for real. So I was going to do this temporary Thai ordination for a couple of months. Didn't work out. I ended up spending 7 days in a mental hospital with a crazy woman instead. Well, that's a story. No, I spent 4 nights. She spent 7 nights. I only spent the first 4 with her and her teacher, who also wasn't really responsible for driving her crazy. It's a really interesting story. But then that experience, and my teacher was a layman, and he was looking after all the foreign meditators. I ended up not ordaining. That's not even the point. The point, it is kind of the point. So I was so set on ordaining. It was just like, I'm going to become a monk, because it just becomes such an awesome thing reading about the monks' rules. I had actually started keeping them, like not lighting fires, things like that. Like I just wanted to keep as many of the monks' rules. But can I do this one? I would look through the monks' rules and say, okay, I can keep this one, and so I would keep it. And it culminated in this final giving it up, because they needed someone, a lay person. I mean, this was the idea at the time. It was actually kind of, I think, fallacious reasoning, that there were things I couldn't do as a monk. And so it's true, actually. There are things that a monk isn't capable of doing, but you can work around it. Anyway, I thought I won't ordain, because then if I ordain, I won't be able to do the things. I mean, this was their reasoning, that monks aren't able to teach as efficiently as lay people. Now, that's a whole other argument that I totally don't agree with. Anyway, but it was upsetting to not be able to ordain. So the first thing I did upon making this decision to cancel my plans for ordination was to go into the town and buy a stainless steel bowl and begin to eat all of my food out of this stainless steel bowl. I said, if I'm not going to ordain, I'm going to pretend, and I'm going to live my life as a fake monk. And I really meant that in the best of possible ways, in the sense that do the best I can, mimic the monastic life as best as I could. And I think that's awesome. I still think that was kind of a great thing to be able to do, and it was, it was encouraging to do. So I definitely recommend that sort of thing. No harm in it. There's some harm in trying to, like, not light fires, for example, because not cook food. Monks can't cook food, so you couldn't light a cook fire. That kind of thing. So yeah, if you're keeping the rules about not cooking and so on, there's lots and lots of them. It gets more and more problematic. Okay, next question.
There's a quick question on, we strive to observe the monastic precepts on Upasata days, correct?
No.
But I'm sure they mean the 8 precepts.
Yeah, those are not monastic precepts. Those are clearly and categorically lay precepts. Interestingly enough, monastics don't have the 8 precepts. Monks don't have the 8 precepts. There is no rule in the Patimokkha against entertainment or beautification. I don't think you can find anything. I mean, you can probably argue one of the rules, but those rules are only outside of the Patimokkha. I mean, they're in the Vinaya, but it's interesting that there is no specific rule for either of those. There's also no rule against the 8th precept, lying and sleeping on, or using high bedding. In fact, high bedding is specifically allowed for monks, provided they haven't made it for themselves. So it's interesting to note, and it kind of puts the 8 precepts in some perspective, I suppose, especially the 8th one, where it's interesting that the problem is, it's an interesting one, because monks do are allowed to sleep on as high a bed as they want, as long as they didn't make it. I mean, I guess you could say it's kind of a loophole. It also helps you look at the monastic rules as still, with their vast number, still not being enough. Still not being a comprehensive, not even necessarily a very accurate assessment of the actual practice. Many of them are just for practical purposes, like touching a man. A male monk touches a male sexually. It could even be on his sexual organ. Doesn't break a rule. If breaks a rule, breaks a very, very small rule, but I think doesn't even break a rule, because practically speaking, touching another monk, touching a monk of the same gender, can be a very necessary thing to do. Suppose you're a doctor, or a monk, no, not a doctor, but a monk who's looking after another monk, and then as you touch the monk, even if you're not homosexual, or if you are, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be homosexual to have sexual thoughts arise, just because you're not enlightened yet. And so to make a rule against it is problematic, to make it a serious rule. No, they would never want to touch each other, because they'd say, well, what if sexual thoughts arise? So it's interesting to look at the contrast. The 8 precepts are clearly a core set of practical precepts. They have nothing to do with fitting into a community, not especially. The monastic rules are designed and balanced more, or at least keeping in mind the benefit to the community. So you have to weigh the benefit to the individual against the benefit of the community. So it's a whole different weighing system, right? I mean, obviously the sixth, or the sixth precept is there. The seventh and the 8th precept don't even figure into the Patimokkha. The 8th is specifically not against the rules. And you could argue the reason being monks sometimes can't choose. They can't say what bedding they're going to sleep on. Sometimes the only bedding that they're given is high bedding. So a monk is in a different position from a layperson. That's, I think, one good example of how that's true. And so the monastic precepts are not always a good guide for lay people. They may actually, in certain small instances, be less valuable than the non-monastic precepts. Interesting, huh?
Mm. The 5 and the 8 precepts are linked in the chat there for anyone who wanted to just distinguish between those two.
Okay.
And I think this question, I think we kind of answered it. It sounds a lot like what we were talking about before. Giving, even if automated or done from a distance, should be held in awareness. So I think that's kind of what we were talking about.
I think we should stop there. It's been an hour and a half. Come back again tomorrow if you have more questions. If you have a question that you've asked here and hasn't been answered, apologies, but there's only so much we can do, so come back again tomorrow. Thank you. Good questions, good debate, and look forward to more news about this monastery project. Oh, it's too late. It's 10:30. I was going to call them tonight. Shoot. I told them we'd give them an answer tonight. I was going to do that.
Can you send them a text or an email?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll send them a text and an email. We have to talk though. Okay, let's get off here. Okay, good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.